Hello, I'm your host, James Hackel, and welcome to the podcast today. Today's episode is recorded on Gumbayenga country. So let's start at the beginning. It's mackerel fishing on the New South Wales mid-north coast, and my guest today is Eugene Tschaut. He's a veteran angler who's held several line class records for different species. I've seen his photo album, and he's caught so many obscenely large fish, including huge mulloway, kingfish, snapper, big mackerel, massive whaler sharks. Eugene, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, James. How are you?
I'm great.
It's a nice day.
It's mid-January on the New South Wales mid-coast at the moment. But we're going to explore a little bit about the Mecca that is Coffs Harbour region and what fishing species are on offer here at different times of the year. Would I be right in thinking that water temperature and the East Australian current is one of the biggest drivers of the marine ecosystem and angling opportunities along the coast here?
100%. Coffs Harbour is approximately, I think Woolley is on the 30th degree latitude as such. And so what we get here is that the East Coast current comes down from north, and it varies in terms of how close it gets to the coast. But what happens is that in summer we tend to get all the pelagics that actually come up, and the pelagics and other fish that come up from Queensland. And in winter we get the cold water fish. We're talking kingfish and others. And it's amazing when you go diving around some of the beautiful islands that are off Coffs Harbour. You'll see in winter a little clownfish, and then you'll see a kingfish nearby. So it's magnificent. Coral will go all the way down as far as Port Macquarie, right, which is about an hour and a half drive by car from Coffs Harbour. But this is like a smorgasbord, because you're getting both seasons, a smorgasbord of species, and you target the very species depending on the season.
Yep. I guess today it's mid-January. I've had a look on my weather app, and it's looking like it's about 26 degrees Celsius off the coast here. I guess 26 or 27 seems to be a good temperature for some of those pelagics showing up off the coast.
Yes. So if you're chasing Spanish mackerel, and that's the focus today, and we're talking Spanish mackerel, spotted mackerel, we do get also occasionally shark mackerel,
yes,
and school mackerel. But spotted mackerel and Spanish mackerel are the most common species. And in there, you'll intermix, occasionally also get some wahoo as well.
Yep.
Right? But if you want to focus more on wahoo, you generally have to go out further, a little bit wider, so to speak. And then you're also into dolphin fishing, things like that. But focusing on Spanish and spotties, what you generally are hoping for is that one of the best things you can get is actually gentle southerlies. The current is heading down from the north. The southerlies hit that current. It's an eddy, and it pushes that eddy in close. And most of us, who've got trailer boats, we're talking 4 metre, 5 metre, 6 metre boats, you tend to fish in an area no more than about 4 or 5 kilometres offshore, right? But you'll catch a lot of these fish even within a couple of 100 metres off the offshore. So it's a nice way to fish.
So that means it's still a prospect for the land-based angler fishing off the headlands.
Yeah. I cut my teeth actually doing it off the rocks, and there was nothing better than back then in those days, either spinning, you'd have a spinning rod ready with a lure or a popper, and then we would have a live bait which would float out, and you'd see the bluefin tuna come through or the mackerel come through, and then you'd be casting. And we did this at Hat Head, also in Coffs. There's a very good series by Ryan Calcutt which shows Joe Gospel and Wayne Calcutt catching Spanish mackerel off Hat Head. So look it up.
A bit of archival footage to track down on that one. I guess the question for many anglers on the east coast of Australia might be, how far south do those pelagics show up?
Look, they've occasionally even shown up as far south as Sydney, but generally speaking, if you're talking any serious numbers, pretty much Port Macquarie is at the southern end of the range in New South Wales. Again, it varies on the current, The current currently is pumping quite strong. And the water right now in close is about 24 degrees. 22 degrees is marginal water. Mm-hmm. 24 is pretty good water. As you start to head out a little bit further outside, it gets to 27. But we've noticed that when the water gets too warm, our favourite bait species is actually to catch these fish on is spotted, well, it's slimy mackerel, slimy mackerel. But if the water gets too hot, I've noticed we mainly catch yellowtail in close.
Right.
So I like water about 24 degrees because that means I've got a good chance to actually catch the bait fish if they like. We also can catch them with Australian bonito. And later on in the season, we're talking April, May, and even June, one of the best baits here is also tailor for them.
Wow. So the mackerel season can go all the way from January or late December, even all the way through to June.
To June, yeah.
Wow. That's excellent. I guess one of the things when I think about the East Australian current, and not only the summer-winter change, but also over a longer cycle, we know about the La Nina and El Nino. I think, one of them brings warmer waters. It's often associated with coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef or the loss of kelp forests in Tasmania. Have you noticed over the years, warmer and hotter years when the current's pushing harder and hotter?
I'm also good friend with other people who go diving, and there's no question we're starting now getting dog-tooth tuna.
Wow.
Off some of our islands, like South side of the island, we've a dock tuna. We're starting to get coral trout.
That's incredible.
Coronation trout.
Wow.
These are fish that we never used to see here. So there's no question that the water is warming.
One of the things I notice when I'm down at the beach is a lot of bird activity beyond the shore break out at sea. I know when I've snorkeled around the headlands, I often see a small white sardine about as long as a finger getting around in the shallows, being chased by cormorants. Is that the kind of bait that the mackerel are chasing?
Look, there are times when they will concentrate on those small baits, right? We're talking white bait, we're talking frogmouth pilchards, which are quite small. They're very hard to actually catch, keep alive, and so on. So you can get away maybe with a pilchard, which is fairly close, a small pilchard. But we actually tend to specialise on mackerel, and we generally wait till about late January to February when the bait schools, we start to get larger yellowtail, larger slimy mackerel, and then that's when I tend to concentrate on them. Prior to that, I tend to concentrate more on snapper and other species.
And I guess for the angler, there's a lot of lure choices out there. When I fished for Spanish mackerel, I've generally trolled bibbed lures, deep diving lures, Halco, double deep, something like that with a wire trace on it. I've had limited success. I've had some success in WA, had some success on poppers, but you prefer live bait here on the Coffs Coast.
Yeah, the way I explain it is that, look, the further north you go, the warmer the water, you can use lures to catch sharks even, right? So when I fished around 1770, right, I don't even worry about catching live bait. I just trawl minnows, deep diving minnows. Halco are one of the better ones. The sort of white one with the red head is a good one. Yep. Another good pattern is the yellowfin tuna pattern, which looks a little bit like a slimy. So they're my two favourite lures that I would tend to trawl. Areas where you get a lot of people and a lot of activity, like 1770, there are a lot of boats out. I found that I ran the line out actually purposely 100 metres out so that they would hear the boat's gone, and all of a sudden the lure or to the fish, the bait fish was there. That I found that very successful. Typically in Coffs, I trawl 30, 40 metres behind the boat because we don't get as much activity.
Yeah, and I guess with lures, the trolling speeds could be a little bit higher than when.
Yeah, it's about 5 to 6 knots is what I tend to concentrate when I trawl. But what I also try to do is place the lure at the front of a wave. If you think of a wave like a window, right, it's sort of kicking up. You've got the lure just behind it. And imagine there's a fish below. That's a massive area that it sees. A lot of people trawl anywhere, but I actually try to place my lures and my bait so it's in that window of opportunity.
Is that
it stands out? Live bait as well as lures. So the other thing is that I wanted to mention is that up north, I don't worry about too much about live bait, but I found, because I used to keep records, and I used to chase the strain records and things like that, and I found statistically a good live bait trawled at just idling speed, and that's what you're doing. Effectively, you are actually hunting the fish. It's a form of hunting rather than sitting in the one spot. You can anchor your boat and put out a burley trail and some cubes instead. But I actually prefer to hunt the fish, actually find the fish.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're reasonable snapper fishing, you've got a pretty good idea where all the reefs are. And they'll go to a reef, they'll eat. When there's no more bait fish around, they'll move to the next one. So sometimes you have to be patient. You may have to trawl a particular reef that you're confident that they're going to be and the water temperature's right 1 or 2 hours before you get a hit. Either that or you then move to the next one.
Yeah.
And so it's just, think of it, they're the post where they're going from reef to reef. The reef, they generally are heading south.
So trolling live baits is a good weight for prospecting to find the fish.
Yeah, and I found using live bait compared to lures, the ratio is like 5-1.
So this is how effective they are at getting the bite from the mackerel.
Correct.
5-1 is a massive difference. If you're live baiting, it's pretty critical to catch some live bait, and that must be the start of the adventure of your day's fishing, is targeting live bait, how to catch them and keep them alive.
Yeah, so something that is absolutely essential in a boat is you need a live bait tank. It's very hard to keep. Slimies need a lot more oxygen, for example, than yellowtail, right? But if your slimies, again, if you get a slimy versus a yellowtail, again, I would say the ratio is like 5 or 6-1. So you try to catch slimies if you can get them, because they are more productive than yellowtail. Yellowtail will still work, no question about it. But I found when the fish are a little bit more finicky, a slimy is a much better bait. So
do they survive well when baited on the hook? Is one better, more vigorous?
Yeah, so the secret is, and I want to show you a rig, maybe it's a good time to talk about a rig, right? So we tend to use, you got to use wire. I tend to like piano wire. It's pretty straight.
Single strand.
For Spanish mackerel, I generally use about 44 pound, right? That's about around 20 kilo.
Yep.
It comes in pounds whenever you buy it. I don't know why it comes in pounds, but anyway.
And a foot long length to your first hook.
Yeah. Have as small a swivel as possible. They've got fantastic eyes.
Black swivel.
Then have a 6-0 between a 4-0 and a 6 hook that you would put through the top of the jaw. Don't put it through both jaws, put it top of the jaw so the fish can swim.
Yep.
And then I tend to, we're talking slimies here and yellowtail, I tend to then have about 6 inches or thereabouts, 8 inches, a treble hook.
Right? And so the length of that depends on the size of your bait.
That's right, your bait. So you have different size rigs. The front hook is just a single hook. It goes through the top jaw. If you're using suicide type hooks, you would put it through because if you look at it closely, the way a suicide hook is designed and where you tie it off, you would put it through the fish's nostrils.
Right.
On both sides.
Because those hooks are offset, have a bend. I noticed that one is a straight hook without an offset.
So that would go straight through the top jaw.
So vertically, straight through, and it'll track without turning sideways.
And your second hook, you would put just between the skin, very little flesh, because you don't want them bleeding too much, right? Towards the tail. About maybe, I'm thinking about 5 centimeters. So the tail can still move behind the tail. And then you're trawling them at generally between 1.5 to 2 knots. If you go much faster than that, the fish have trouble keeping up and they'll die quicker. So you've got your engine typically adjusting gear. Some people who've got too powerful motors and just trawling just with the engine idling, it becomes too much. What they'll often do is they'll even hang a bucket over the side to actually slow the boat down.
Drogue, And I guess clicking in and out of gear gets a bit painful after time, so I never like doing that too much.
Well, you sometimes have to do that because when you're going into the current, you may have the current pushing down at 2 knots, right? Or thereabouts, you may then just go forward a bit in gear. Then, you would have to drop it back because it gets to 3 knots, 3.5. You would then drop it back. So what I tend to do, I tend to try and go at 45 degrees rather than go straight into a current when the current's really pumping.
Right. Well, that's probably a good element to consider is whether you're going into the current, coming back with the current, or going across at 45 degrees, because I guess that changes how the bait's dragging through the water. I guess having 3 knots on your GPS with a 3-knot current means that you're doing all of a sudden 6 knots.
So you shouldn't just use the GPS. The problem with the GPS, that gives you only the speed you're going across the water. What you want is a paddle wheel at the end of your transducer. The paddle wheel tells you the speed you're going through the water.
Yeah.
And that's the one that you're monitoring. And you try to keep it around, 1.5, 2.5 maximum in that range. So that's where driving, you may sometimes have to go 45 degrees.
And is it true that there's times when you'll catch more fish going against or across or with the current, that there's a definite preference?
I generally find, well, yes and no. I've caught very few heading straight into the current, directly to the current, but I've caught them diagonally across the current. I've caught them going with the current.
Yeah.
So look. To me, it's about that. Obviously, they're going to where the bait schools are as a general, and they've worked out. When I've dived with some friends for mackerel free dive, we generally have seen mackerel hovering around the edge of the reef where the sand starts in the reef. And I've seen a lot of mackerel, they seem to like around 15, 18, 20 meters of water, reefs. And they'll sit there hovering, and then they might obviously go for a feed, and they come back out. So I tend to target the edge of reefs, but I also will go, I then have caught very few right on the top of the pinnacle of the reef. That's Spanish mackerel, so to speak, and spotties as well. Spotties, for example, I find with Spanish mackerel, I generally find very early in the morning and very late in the afternoon is an added bonus. You'll catch them during the day, no question. They've got a small stomach, they've got to eat a lot. They burn up a lot of energy when they're swimming. But Spanish generally, we found very early morning, very late afternoon, the first hour of daylight and the last hour of daylight. Spotties generally are a little bit easier. I actually like a running down tide for spotty. The water gets a little bit dirty. Maybe they can't see the bait fish as well, but it's worked very well for me.
Some people even use downriggers. What's the way that you adjust the depth? Is it trolling speed or do you use weights?
Yeah, so what you can even do sometimes, if you're in an area where you're confident that because I'm watching my sounder constantly, and I know, okay, I look when my bait's 30, 40 minutes behind, and I can see some Spanish on the sounder, and I can tell by the depth. If my bait is too high, what I'll do is when I get a bit closer, I'll actually stop the engine and let those baits actually slowly drift downwards, so to speak. I'll use that technique, and then I'll go very slowly forward, just a little bit, so obviously you don't want to get snagged on the bottom. You go a bit more forward, and then I'll do it again. What we'll also do as a general, because I don't have a downrigger, some people do use downriggers, and you can set the depth precisely, so to speak. But what we do is we actually tend to not use, some people use some sort of like a drone mechanism, which you can hang off, and it finds the depth. But we tend to use a small sinker, round sinker, about an ounce on one rig, and the other rig is basically without anything, and then we'll see which one works better. If we find that we're getting hit more, with the one that's got the sinker on it, then we'll change the other rig as well. So you've got to try things, and the secret is you're out there, you're exploring, you're basically a hunter, and you have to think about what's going on. You look at birds. I'll be watching birds. Occasionally you'll see, forget seagulls, they're not very good, but frigates, for example, typically, if they're following a particular game fish or schoolfish, you generally find they're following the game fish. The height above the water that they're flying at is where they are. When they're circling, looking for fish, they're normally very, very high. But when you watch them follow a particular direction at a slower speed, they're generally at the depth that the game fish are. And so use those techniques where you're trawling, look, your bait's a bit high, stop the boat for a second, let it drift down, go a bit forward slowly. You've got to be thinking all the time.
I guess when you're putting a sinker into the rig, will you add it to the trace, or you have it on the nylon above the trace?
So I take the risk. I put it just before the swivel.
Yeah, and that's enough that it'll get your lively down to at least a few more meters down, if not 10 meters down.
Yeah, no, it'll drop it down about a meter.
A meter.
It's not a lot, but think about it. We're trawling in water. That's not a lot. They've got incredible eyesight. The water is crystal clear this time of year. They can see that bait. right? If they want that bait, they'll take it, you know?
So really, as long as it's in that first metre of the water, they're going to see it. And so the difference between having an ounce sinker or an unweighted rig might only be a metre's difference.
Correct.
Handy to know. And I guess if it's choppy or windy, does that sort of make a difference at all whether you'd use a sinker or not?
Once rig would always have a sinker, one rig without a sinker. I like it to be a little bit choppy because what it means is the reflection off the side, they can't see our rigs as well, like, because obviously, you know, there's wire involved. Mackerel hunt by sight. They've got fantastic eyesight. When we used to spin off them up at Hat Head, you know, using lures only, and just go back to my younger days, we would go hours on end. We'd have 4 or 5 of us. One would always be at the top of the headland looking for the fish, would tell us, cast your lure at such and such an angle. And I've seen mackerel attack the lure, and they do similar things with bait. What they do is actually follow it. They then peel off at nearly 90 degrees, do a huge U-turn. They've worked out obviously where this bait or lure is going to be, and they come in side on.
Wow.
And they hit it at speed. It's magic to see in action. And when they're hitting a lot of surface fish, like occasionally we'll even trawl mullet, and if that's all that's available, particularly around April, you know, there's a lot of mullet around, and they'll eat mullet. And mullet tend to be very close to the surface, much more to the surface than yellowtail and slimies or Australian bonita. Every time they've hit those, they come out of the water, and it's
Wow.
magnificent sight. You see it with this fish in its mouth as it cleaves the water, at least 1 to 2 meters to 3 meters.
So there's acrobatics going on out the back of the boat when you get
Exciting
stuff indeed. I guess one of the things that the listener might be interested in is how you find that live bait, how you catch it, and what your techniques are.
So if they're very, very scarce, you may have to put some bait on your jigs. We tend to use jigs. You buy them. My favorite jigs are sabiki rigs. I like the ones that have a bit of skin on it. It's actually fish skin. A little fish skin. They're small hooks. Number 14, 12, 14 is the size that I tend to prefer. Depends on the size of the bait, but that's my starting point. And you normally want to put about a 4-ounce sinker at least on the bottom of the rig. And the reason for that is that you actually find your bait schools on your sounder. You'll see the bait schools, they're schooled up. Sometimes you'll see your sounder totally chock-a-block, you know, from bottom to the top. But most of the time, half the sounder will be full. Where it's very red, the schools are more concentrated. We see more bluey colours on my sounder. They're a little bit more dispersed. But you actually drop it down and you'll feel them hit it. The reason why I need the 4-ounce sinker is that if you get 2 or 3 fish, they're running at different angles, that jig will get tangled up. The 4-ounce sinker keeps the line a little bit tight, and there's less likely that the rig gets tangled. You actually drop it down. Sometimes if they're only on the bottom, just off the 1 meter off the bottom, the schools will drop to the bottom, lift it up a little bit so you don't get snagged, and then you very gently jig it up and down. And most of the time, as it's dropping, is when the fish tend to hit, whether it's yellowtail or slimies. You feel a hit, you got one, you can very gently wind it, maybe get 2 or 3, and then wind it up. Right? Some of the wider live bait grounds that we've got here are 35, 40 meters offshore. There, you would definitely wait to get more than 1 fish, you know, before you wind it up.
It's a long way to wind it up from 40 meters.
Just for 1 fish. You know?
I guess the sabiki rig, it's got 5 individual hooks.
I think they come with 6. I think they come with 6. That's the standard of Mackerel.
I have, and normally they're used unbaited. I have heard that some people might put a scent gel, you know, like the S Factor or something else, a little bit of if things are tough, to stimulate a bite.
Yeah, you would do that, and maybe a small bit of bait, a little bit of pilchard, a little bit of prawn or something. But generally speaking, most of us will drive around until we find the bait schools. Then you found the bait schools. Then that's often a good place to actually start fishing.
So you'll actually get a live bait in the water straight away and fish that school, because there'll be predators. No doubt you'll see predators on the sounder as well sometimes.
You may or may not, you know, but if it's a good enough bait school and there's a lot of bait schools in that area, then I would actually concentrate on that area first, and I would wait. I'll try it for 2-3 hours, hoping that the Spanish would turn up rather than go to find another reef nearby, hoping that they're there. To me, if the food's there, the fish eventually will turn up.
So you've got to stay with the bait. So I guess your fish finder becomes very important to keep trolling over and keep repositioning where the bait has drifted to.
Very important, eyes in the water. The bait generally will still hang around. It's very rare that the bait actually will move around too far. Occasionally, I've seen that. But as a general school, once they get attacked, you'll see the bait being broken up in different areas. And that's usually when okay, this bait school has been attacked, right? It's a bit nervous. Sometimes it's a bit hard then to catch the live boats. But I'll spend a good hour and a half getting the live bait before I fish. The guys on lures can fish straight away. I'm prepared to put the time in to actually get the live baits first.
So how many baits do you need? I mean, I imagine you've got a big day's fishing. You've got hopefully you've got a big enough live bait tank to keep them alive. What's your objective? What's your target for baits?
I generally like to have about at least 2 dozen baits between two fishing. Yeah. So we'll persevere till we get that. Some days that'll happen in 10 minutes. Other times it could take us 1.5 hours. Just depends. Every day is different. The other day we went out, we only caught 8 live baits, right? And we had a dozen boats around us. And in the time we got 8, I only saw 1 or 2 other boats actually catch the odd yellowtail. And we tried 6 different reefs. So the water, current, the temperature, whatever it was, has changed significantly. 2 weeks earlier, right? We filled the tub up within 10 minutes.
And maybe the bait have gone to cooler waters down south?
Yeah, the water was a little bit cooler, just a little bit cool.
And I do know, I've heard some fishing reports up here recently where people say, we couldn't find any bait and we didn't catch any fish.
Well, yeah, it is what it is.
So we've talked a little bit about rigs for live baiting techniques for mackerel. What other tackle do you need and what's your preferred way of using it?
Okay, so I actually make my own rods. So I tend to like short stroker rods for trawling for mackerel. And the reason being is they are quite stiff, close to where you hang on to your rod, so to speak, in the reel, for about say 300, 400 millimeters, but they're also not a little bit tippy as well on the end, because I like it as you're trawling slowly and you hit a wave, that tip is moving a little bit, right? If my uncle is driving my boat, we're taking turns driving, and I've got the rod on the side, I'll actually move my rod back and forth a few times, just to change the speed of the bait,
Mm-hmm.
Drop it back a little bit, pull it forward, increase and decrease the speed. I like things to sort of be a little bit different, not just trawl at exactly the one speed. But if you're the captain driving, it's a little bit hard, so you just got to put it in the rod on. We've normally got the ratchet on. I favour overhead reels. A good size reel for mackerel is a TLD 15, TLD 25.
There's also the TLD 20.
Yeah.
Narrow
It's
spool.
a 20, yeah. Narrow spool. Now with braid, in this day and age, otherwise we would go for the TLD 20. You don't need to go as far as TLD 25. I like the 25 because I also chase other species that take more line. Generally, you don't need more than 20 to 30 pound line is more than adequate, right, for these things. So we're talking 10 kilo, 15 kilo maximum that's required. These days I'll trawl with braid. My braid is, again, 30 pound braid. You don't need anything more than that. But all of my friends prefer trawling mono straight through 30. If you're using braid, then I like to use a fluorocarbon leader of about 4 or 5 meters.
4 or 5 meters helps handling the fish.
Yeah. I tend to tie that on using an Albright knot. All right, I double on the braid, and then I use an Albright knot because there's a big difference in the diameter of the braid and the leader material. Some people like to use egg beaters. Right, I've got here a bait caster, Shimano 4500. I make a 6500 as well, and so on. Why I prefer overhead reels or game reels is because you can put the drag on, set your drag in advance, pull it back, You know, if this is really going crazy, I would normally loosen the drag a bit, and then when it slows up, I can put the drag up, and you can get back exactly to the same spot. Egg beaters are pretty good. They come with, like, for example, a bait runner is not too bad, but why I don't like them as much is because the first starting point of the line is it goes across to the bail arm and comes out at 90 degrees. That's a huge friction point. If you look closely at that roller, and it's a very small roller, it'd be half a centimetre maximum size. Now imagine a spotty, a wahoo, a Spaniard, we generally do 15, 20, 25 kilometres an hour through the water. So why I prefer overheads and game reels, because the line goes out and comes back. You can hold the rod out straight. It's going across those smooth guys, and there's not much friction. There's a huge friction point with egg beaters.
And I know with a lot of my old reels, the line roller is probably the first thing to seize up. So they're not even spinning anymore. The line's basically rubbing on the roller. And I know with the egg beaters, you can get into some incredible capacity now. So a lot of people are getting, when they're using braid, particularly as drags have gotten better over time, but people are downsizing the reel from an 8,000 reel, now using a 5,000 size spinning reel.
That's correct. But you've got to be with something more. When you've got very fast running fish, you can pull off a lot of line very quickly. Don't forget that drag is increasing. As the diameter of your reel goes down, you've actually got to back off the drag.
Yeah.
Most people do the opposite. They panic. They tighten it up, and they wonder why the line broke.
Yeah.
The drag probably is double what they had initially as the line decreased, and they tighten it up even more. That's the advantage of leader drags. If you look at these two reels, for example, the spool diameter is huge. So you can take 100 meters off this, and there's very little difference on the lever drag. Take that off a reel like this, 2,500, that would make a significant difference. But you've got to be then slowly backing off the drag.
So it's important to remain vigilant and adjust your drag settings, particularly on the spin reels, constantly, particularly on the fast fish that do long runs. One thing I noticed about your rods is how light they are, particularly for their strength. My budget doesn't extend to sort of custom rods, and you make them yourself. My go-to is like a 7-foot fiberglass rod, one piece. We're often traveling. We've got the rooftop tinny. There's a lot of other stuff. Rods are going in and out of cars all the time. It's almost indestructible. I think if you're looking at a rod characteristic, it's something that's got enough muscle in the butt, but has enough shock and give in the tip.
Yeah, look, it all depends on your drag. The most important thing is that your drag is very, very smooth. And I use the analogy of a knife going into butter very softly, and it should be like that. There should be no jerking. It shouldn't jerk. But if I yanked it suddenly, that line would break. So I use the analogy, the drag is critical. So number one is the drag. Then obviously you need the right line class of the species that you're targeting. Generally speaking, because mackerel got such hard mouths, it's important that obviously you have very sharp hooks, and that's a given. And I actually file some of my hooks, but these days you can buy chemically sharpened hooks, so that's no longer necessary. But it's important that the tip has enough strength that it doesn't just bend out of the way totally, right? It needs to have some give, but it needs to have enough guts in the rod that actually pulls that hook in, because the jaw on mackerel, if ever you clean one, you'll see it's about a good 25, 30 millimeters, right, across, and in width it's maybe half a centimeter to a centimeter, and it's very, very hard. And the best place to hook them obviously is in the side of the mouth or deep, right? But if you have too soft a hook, you will not be able to pull the hook in. Also, if the line class is, so for me, 6 kilos is the bare minimum. Generally 10 kilos is about right, 15 about the maximum. But 10 kilo gives you a nice fight. They'll take quite a lot of line. You'll enjoy the fight, and you'll be able to control the fish eventually.
I know keeping a tight line to stay connected to the fish. So obviously you've got to make sure you've got a good hook set that penetrates the jaw of the fish. Staying connected to the fish once you've hooked them. I've lost fish when I've let the line go slack, particularly trying to land fish last minute, and you're looking for a net. The tip of the rod goes down. the line goes slack, and there goes your fish. Nylon gives you a bit of a stretch, which I imagine also helps keep a tight line.
So people get excited, right? Because the fish is coming along. And you said earlier, make sure you keep the rod bent slightly. We also are noticing of late, we're getting more and more sharks, right? And we're getting shark more often. So it's very important to get that catch in as soon as you can. And the sooner you get the catch in, there's less chance that things can go wrong, whether it be the hook dropping out or a shark coming along and so on. So we tend to try to reduce the fight as much as possible. When you get the fish close, that's when you've got to make a decision. Are we going to let the fish go, or are we planning to actually keep this fish? That's where you make decisions on, are we going to gaff the fish, or are we going to use a very big landing net, right? With mackerel, bear in mind, mackerel have got very big teeth. I've seen a lot of rubber nets chomp through.
Yeah.
The nylon ones seem to be a bit better for that, right? But you need a decent sized landing net.
A big net for a big fish there.
Yeah, and then there's the other bit. Then it comes to gaffing. I've seen a lot of people who have no idea how to gaff. The fish is coming along from left to right. They'll actually gaff. On the right-hand side, they miss. And what they do is hit the line and pull the line out of the fish. So it's best to let the fish go past and then come from behind the fish. A lot of people I've seen with a gaff, they put the point upwards. The point should be pointing down. What it means is that as you put it in the water, gravity will work in your side. You can get it into the shoulder, just behind the head or the shoulder, and it goes in. People do the opposite. They want to gaff it in the belly. They put it down low. The problem is it's going deeper, right, because of gravity. And then if they do hook in the belly, there's very little meat around there. It's easy actually for the fish when it thrashes for the gaff to actually come out.
Tear out of the fish.
There's even a whole lesson on gaffing.
And netting, no doubt.
But these are the fundamentals.
I've handed the net to some people sometimes who have tried to land the fish by the tail end. And sometimes you can get a bit short with people. Don't do that, head first only. Yeah. And I think, gaffing around the back of the head is a pretty safe bet if you can at all help it. And I guess that leads to a lot of safety, not only with the gaff, but mackerel, wahoo, they can be big angry fish with a dangerous set of razors in their mouth. I've often seen footage of people bringing a big mackerel into the boat and it flailing around and people's bare feet on the deck of the boat with these not only hooks but razor sharp teeth getting around. So I think that leads to the question of how to prepare for landing the fish, how you should be set up, what you need to think about to do it safely, what are the tools you need to dehook the fish, to subdue it, settle it down, how not to get a hook or a tooth in your hands, how to dispatch it humanely. And I assume it looks like you've got all your fingers and still, so you might be doing something right. How do you go about making sure, particularly if you've got newbies in the boat, getting this done right?
Yes, look, having caught a lot of fish, I love nothing better than watching other people catch fish. It's a real buzz, and how excited they get. And, with a line coming off a reel with a mackerel, they'll generally, the first run will be 150 up to 200 meters.
Incredible.
Then you can slowly work it back. The guests will be usually typically 50 meters above, and then there'll be a second run, right?
And this is the adrenaline pump where the reel is screaming. It's the noise everyone wants to hear. It's all good.
Yeah. So when so if I just focus on gaffing, for example, I like to sort of gaff the fish behind the head. I'm holding the gaff away from my body clearly. The fish can't flail because the tail is out of the water, right? We've got it. What we then do is we have a donga, right? Think of it like it's a small baseball bat, right? 1 or 2 quick, hard taps on the head is very, very important because those teeth could easily take off a finger, and bite into a hand, take off toes,
It's humane for the fish and it probably preserves the fish quality.
Correct.
Fish can still writhe around. They still have nerves, even with a big whack on the head. They can still shudder and flick. Yeah. So how do you get them secure?
Okay, so I'm still holding it with a gaff, a couple of very hard taps on the head, right? The fish is subdued. What we then do is hold it over the side. We actually cut the throat, right? Because we want to bleed the fish out, right? Usually, and usually my friend is then holding the the fish also by the tail. We'll hold it sideways in the water, let it bleed out. We got control on one end, the other end. The fish usually, after a couple of taps on the head, is quite subdued. There's hardly any movement. Mahi a bit different. They're a bit crazy. But it's another story, and that's another series. But with Spanish, we tend to bleed them, and then all of that gets put straight into the tub. I've got a tub that can handle 6 to 7 mackerel, Spanish mackerel.
It's a big esky.
One
I've seen
hit,
that.
it goes in, right? And then what you're using is long-handled, very strong pliers, and then you will pull the hooks out, right? If you want to reuse the rig. If the rig is twisted or bent, you would normally just cut it off, tying your rig on, and then you go again.
You can almost leave the hooks in the fish if you're going to dispose of that rig, maybe get it out later.
Correct.
And I guess putting that fish on ice, in the esky, out of the sun, and well bled and dispatched means that you're going to have the best possible quality of fish. At the end of the day, if you're going to keep a fish, want to take it home with you, treat it right, look after it. I know you do.
Yep. Look, you've gone to all the trouble to catch a fish like this, right? Spotty is Spanish, very good eating fish. Consequently, it makes sense that you look after the flesh. And I believe that's the case of all fish, right? We then put in a couple of buckets of seawater.
Yep. That
becomes very, very cold. And the best thing you can do then is, having bled the fish, you kill the fish humanely, bled the fish, you then put that in that cold water, it then starts to chill. Then eventually when you come to cleaning, makes cleaning also easier, makes easier skinning the fish easier as well. You may want to go cutlets, fish like Spanish and spotted. I tend to fillet my spotties, and I tend to do cutlets with my Spanish mackerel. And then you've got fantastic flesh and good eating flesh. And it would be a waste to not look after the flesh.
So there's a couple of tools you need besides a gaff, some long pointy nose pliers for dehooking. I guess that goes with dehooking any fish, particularly where you've got trebles around your hands. If you do get cut on the back of the leg or something by a wayward Spanish mackerel bite, you could have some serious bleeding. So be safe on the water. Tell us a little bit about the fight online with the mackerel. They're known for having the blistering early runs and follow-up runs. How do they behave when they get a bit close to the boat?
So when they're getting close to the boat, obviously the fish will start to circle more and more, right? This is where center consoles or side consoles are quite good. You can walk all the way around the fish, so to speak. If you don't have that sort of boat, then if let's say you've got a half cabin, that's a bit harder. So the best thing then is to keep the boat in gear, moving very slowly forward. You keep it to one side, and you swing. You're driving very slowly forward, and the angler's job is to bring the fish closer and closer, and eventually the fish starts to do very small circles. We will then usually stop the boat, and when you get the fish quite close, they're fairly easy to get, because what you do is you don't bring a fish in when it's green. You actually let that fish run, and so that's where the good drags come in. Let it run, and it'll expend all its energy. If it has a really good run, the first run, and then I mentioned earlier, typically a second run, then by the time you get it close to the boat, it's fairly straightforward. Other fish, like we catch a lot of bluefin tuna when we're also trawling for Spanish. Well, that's a longer fight. We're talking 25, 30 minutes. And it's funny, in here they always circle in the southern hemisphere anti-clockwise, around and around, and you'll get your line back and it'll go down again. And you'll wind it up and it'll go down again. Same with yellowfin. So that's a different sort of thing. But again, all those fish too will, the best thing is when you're ready for gaffing or netting, you should not be gaffing or netting fish that are green. You've got to actually make sure that they've worn themselves out, and then everything becomes fairly and easy.
That's a really good perspective around, one, the advantages of open boats. You might need to wear more sunscreen and hats and things in an open boat without a bimini or sunshade, but the ability to fight a fish 360 degrees as it circles a boat is pretty handy.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of the fish I've caught when you're in gear trawling, you might drop the revs down a little bit, but staying in gear and moving is more stable for a boat, particularly a tinny often. It keeps the boat a little bit more stable when you're underway. During the fight, you keep that line pressure, keep the line tight to stay connected to the fish. And when you're bringing a fish alongside the boat, you've just got a little bit of that current. Obviously, it's head first. The ability to gaff it while it's moving forward means we've all missed the gaff shot when the fish kind of is a bit too late and you can't quite get it. I think that helps. Having the boat in gear sometimes seems to help gaff the fish. How big do these fish grow, and what are the regular sizes that you're catching along the mid-north coast?
There's no question that over the years, the size of the fish that we're catching and I'm talking about the mid-north coast, has the quantity and the size has actually decreased. A good size spotty here is around the 5-6 kilo mark, but typically you're looking about 3 kilos. Right? Spanish mackerel, if I go back, in my early 20s, we were catching a lot of Spanish mackerel, 25, 30 kilo, was common. That was a good sized fish, but a lot of 18 kilo fish. Now, even the Spanish have decreased in size. You'll get the odd one, but the majority are around the 13, 14 kilo mark. So they've decreased. I know Queensland has got some closed seasons. We don't have that at this stage in New South Wales. They're actually getting caught all the way down as they come down the coast from the top end of Queensland, right down to here. So by the time they come down to our area, they're pretty smart, and you've got to use a number of techniques.
They've been educated by every angler in Queensland by the time they get to New South Wales. I guess that's a sobering thought around both the size and number of fish declining over the years. 30 kilograms is an absolutely massive barrel of a Spanish mackerel. I can only imagine what the fight's like on one of those big fish. Of course, one of the risks that can come with big fish, at least in Queensland, is the risk of ciguatera poisoning. Is ciguatera known to be common even in the large fish that are found in the mid-north coast?
Yeah, so on the mid-north coast, we've only heard the odd incidents, right? The DPI suggests not keeping Spanish larger than 20 kilos. Right? That's what some of the websites have indicated. I've been catching Spanish since I was 22 years of age, for 50 odd years. So I've never had a problem, and of course some quite large ones, up to about 30 kilos in size. I believe when they come down the coast, whatever they're eating, the sort of fish they're eating in Queensland, gets out of their system by the time they reach here. But look, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert, I can only go on personal experience. I've never had a problem. I've never had a problem with fish. But again, you're unlikely to catch many fish over 20 kilos these days.
Yeah. It's an interesting phenomenon, the ciguatera poisoning. I think it affects your nerves. I don't think you'd really want any of the symptoms, and it can last for a while. I know it's common in areas of the Pacific. Interestingly, in Western Australia, where I've caught mackerel, they don't have ciguatera poisoning. It's something to keep in mind, particularly, I guess, if you're further north in Queensland. And I guess it's still a residual risk to keep an eye on, so maybe avoid the really big fish.
So just on that, I've had actually 2 friends who've had ciguatera, and it's an interesting phenomenon. If you do catch it, when you eat something hot, it feels cold. When you eat something cold, it feels hot. It's the exact opposite. And and most of my friends, I said, it's there for a while, and then it disappears, then it comes back.
I have heard people reporting a metallic taste in their mouth for quite a long time. So, but also certain kind of paralysis and vomiting and serious illness. And I think part of that is how much fish you eat as well. If you're eating big Spanish mackerel, maybe don't eat it every night for the next month. But they're incredible eating fish. I've heard that the wahoo is, for many people, even better eating. And you encounter them here as a bit of a bycatch. Have you caught many wahoo over the years?
Yes. You will catch them around the Saltire Islands occasionally, right? Right now, they're actually just the last couple of weeks, they've actually caught a few wahoo, right, around that. But generally speaking, the guys who will get the wahoo, they're a little bit further offshore. We're talking slightly warmer water, right? They're usually trawling for marlin, generally speaking. But you can target them out wide if you want to chase wahoo. Again, even faster fish than Spanish and spotty.
I guess one of the observations you've made is the reduced numbers and sizes. I know in Queensland there's been a reduced bag limit for Spanish mackerel, which has been reduced to 1 fish per person per day and a boat limit of 2 fish. I believe the minimum length is still 75 centimetres like in New South Wales. I guess in Queensland, that bag limit is there. Obviously, the Queensland fisheries believe that it was necessary, and that the catch rate has been too high, that whether it's the commercial or recreational or a combination of the take of the fish has been too high. Those management rules are in place. I'm not sure, unless they're undersized, many people would be releasing too many Spanish mackerel, given how good they are. Do they release okay?
It's especially if you hook them on live bait, not as much because they tend to swallow the bait a little bit deeper, but quite easy on stick baits and minnows to release a Spanish. Again, you got to be careful, when you bring it close to the boat.
Yeah.
But there is no problem releasing them, and then you just spear them in the water.
And I guess for a lot of catch and release fishermen, they're probably going to be focusing on lure fishing.
Correct.
One thing that I do occasionally is swap out my trebles for single hooks.
Mm-hmm.
I'll still probably use 2 singles on a large hard body, but it's certainly a lot easier and safer and better for the fish if you can reduce the amount of carnage on the fish and the damage that hooks create, particularly trebles.
And they're easier to release on single hooks, yeah.
And safer. You want to get them off that hook. The technique for releasing a mackerel, I imagine you want to keep them in the water. I don't know if you've ever lost those pointy nose flies over the side of the boat, but I imagine it's a bit of a procedure where you need to be able to control the line. So, and obviously you don't want to touch the wire, otherwise that can cut your hand pretty severely. So a bit of a wrap around the nylon and in with the pointy nose pliers,
Usually we've got somebody holding the fish by the tail.
Yeah.
You're driving across very slowly.
In gear, yeah.
In gear, very slowly, and then you've got the fish head right just out of the water, but long nose pliers.
Keep your hands away from the hook. I wonder what the longest pliers you can find in the world could be. Maybe this is a new fishing invention. Let's see a super long plier set come onto the market. Losing fish to sharks. How common an event is that on the mid-north coast, and does it happen more in summer when the water's warmer?
So my experience has been we haven't lost too many spotties because you can bring them in a bit quicker, the smaller fish, because they're trawling with the same outfits, right, for Spanish and spotties. But Spanish, on average, I tend to lose about 1 in 5 to sharks. Some days, for example, I've fished the lighthouse, southeast Solitary Island, and I lost 1, 2 in a row, and then I stopped fishing for them because I just figured, what's the point? I don't want to just feed the sharks, and I felt sorry for the Spanish, even though if I would have caught them, I would still eat them, but I didn't want to feed the sharks. So I tend to, if I find the sharks around, I'll then try and find another reef, then go somewhere else. If we start to get shark, you got to move on, because have they gotten smarter? Have they got used to listening to boats and then knowing that there's some food around? And obviously they pick up the vibrations of the Egypt fish, because a fish swimming under tension is not swimming naturally, and sharks can pick up those vibes from many kilometers away. So that's why I say keep the flight as short as possible if you can. But if the fish is big enough, then you're not always in total control.
Yeah. What are the species of sharks that you think are primarily responsible for taking fish? Is it the bull shark? Is it
No. In the majority of sharks that we've seen are the common whalers.
common whalers?
Nice. People talk bronzy whaler. Bronzy whaler are quite rare. I don't see that many of those, right? Grey-nose sharks, don't see them that often either, but predominantly it's the common whalers, you know. Yes, where we live in Coffs, we've got tiger sharks and the odd white pointer as well, but the predominant shark is the common whaler. Yeah. But if you're hooked up on a mackerel and the sharks are there, then it happens periodically.
You've been fishing here since before the marine parks were created, the Solitary Islands Marine Parks. Have you seen the benefit of protection of fish stocks bleed over into areas where you are allowed to fish?
I believe in the principle of having marine parks, right? I also believe that some of the parks should be extended, in my opinion. But I also believe that there's got to be a fine line.
So everyone, that was today's Spanish mackerel, spotted mackerel and wahoo episode on the New South Wales mid-north coast. Hopefully everyone's found a lot of information shared by Eugene. Eugene, thanks so much for joining me today. Hopefully you'll join us again to talk about some of your favourite other species in the Coffs Coast. As a bit of a teaser for the listener, what would be maybe your top 5 other species in the mid-north coast to target?
Look, my favourite species is kingfish because they are so unpredictable, right? So anything can happen when you hook a kingfish. You know, I've seen kingfish that have jumped over nets, you know, so they're to me the number one fish that I enjoy catching. Obviously, I tend to focus on species that are here in predominant numbers. So in winter, I generally like to catch snapper, whether it be by using plastic lures, so to speak, or with bait. They're a lot of fun. Obviously, occasionally like to also target pearl perch because they're quite a very good eating fish. But I also believe I enjoy fishing for flathead and whiting and brim in the rivers. We've got some fantastic estuaries here.
Incredible rivers.
And it becomes like a picnic on water. You go there, you pump some yabbies, you have some lures as well, and you can go for a swim, you know, and work with nature, work with the tides, especially, you know, when you're in the estuaries. It becomes paramount. So I think you've got everything here, you know, I've even caught some freshwater fish in Coffs Harbour out at Ebor. You can catch trout, so to speak. Those are sort of keen on trout.
And there's native bass in a lot of the...
There's so many species, but I think I've covered pretty much the main fish.
And I know mulloway is another favourite of yours, and you've shown me some incredibly large mulloway caught off the headlands and beaches and other areas along here. So Eugene, thank you. Hopefully we'll get you back to have another chat about fishing on the Coffs Coast. And thanks for being here today.
It's been a pleasure.